Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unfiltered Flow ELSC. I'm Megan Cook. That's Alan Burdett. And today it is our pleasure to welcome Mr. Richard Woodruff to the show. Richard is an account manager at Sunsource. Hi, Richard.
Hello. How's it going today?
All right, Richard. How did you get started in the fluid power industry?
Well, I come to the fluid power industry from a little bit of a non-traditional pathway, I guess you might say, and that's probably true for a lot of people. But for me, I didn't follow the normal technical engineering credential path into fluid power. I was a management major in college, graduated with a management degree, and got out of college and had been working for a couple of years at a rental construction equipment rental company. And I could kind of see that wasn't really where I wanted to spend my life doing that kind of work. I was enjoying it, was managing some people and that sort of thing, but wasn't for me. And I started looking around at want ads as you did in those days to find a job. And strangely enough, NASA wasn't hiring for astronauts at that time. So I guess I went to my second dream job. So I started looking at something caught my eye about uh, position in a nearby town for a salesperson in fluid power, and it was slated to be inside sales transitioning to outside sales. And I thought sales sounded interesting, at least had the potential to be somewhat lucrative, and gave me a chance to do a few different things on a daily basis. But I didn't really know what fluid power was, so I managed to get an interview with them, and that was one of the big questions I had in the interview: is, "Hey, what do you guys really do?" And so we walked through their warehouse. They showed me some of the products sold and so forth, and looked at some pneumatic products, other hydraulic products, and things like that. And it started to click with me because I grew up on, I'll call it a pseudo farm. It was a farm, but it was, by the time I was coming along, it had lost its vigor. It was in an area that was being overrun by a major city. So there wasn't as much farming. It was more of just a hobby farm at that time. So we had a lot of worn out equipment, and I spent a lot of time working on worn out equipment when I was a teenager and young adult. So I had some idea what fluid power was from the hydraulic standpoint. And also I was very mechanically inclined. So that kind of got me introduced to fluid power, at least as within a company that could train me. And that's what they did pretty well. They gave me a lot of leeway to learn. I started out in inside sales, and one of the team members there spent a lot of time with me the first year or two. We would come in early or work late to go through catalogs and fluid power training manuals and so forth. So I kind of got a bit of a hang for what I was doing, and they decided to hand me the keys of the company car and a trunk full of catalogs and send me on my way. So I was introduced to the fluid power sales world right there. It's been a few years, 3.5 decades plus right now. Oh, Ellen, I'm not.
You're on mute, buddy.
I know what you mean about the astronauts because back in the mid '70s, when I was flying, my buddy of mine was another Navy pilot. We decided we were going to apply for the astronaut program. So we got the application, and this was probably about 74, 75. First question on the application was, "In what discipline do you have your doctorate?" Oh, we didn't get past the first question.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was. I always dreamed of being an astronaut when I was, 3 or 4 years old, watching the moon landings and all of that sort of stuff. I got my
Yeah,
pilot's license, all that good stuff, and then reality hit.
yeah. Hey, you say you've been in the industry, what, about 3.5 decades. What's changed the most during your time in the industry?
The thing that's changed the most, and it's both good and bad, is complexity, I think, on a lot of levels. And I think it's good because I see a greater degree of sophistication in a lot of the products that are offered I can use as solutions for my customers, or some of the solutions my customers come up with now. But it's definitely more complicated than it was when I started in the late 80s. Uh, I know what's interesting is when I first started, the line cards that I had for the company I was selling for still had their teletype address on them. I don't think they were still using it, but it still had the teletype address. We'd transitioned to far more modern things at the time, the fax. Now you've probably got 15 different ways we communicate with each other on a daily basis. At that time, it was physical letter, phone call, maybe a fax if it was urgent enough. And everything we did was around that. We'd schedule our appointments using those methods. So now we've got tons of ways to communicate. The products we carry are a lot more complicated. We've gone from relatively manual control, cables, direct levers, sometimes pilot operated, to more and more electrically operated, and things are controlled through ECUs and so forth. The CAN bus system was, if it was even existent, it was in its very infancy in the late 80s. And now um, CAN systems are ubiquitous on a lot of mobile equipment, which is an area I concentrate on in my sales. So I think the easy way to say it's just the complication, and that's not the complication, but the complexity of everything is much more significant. And at the same time, it's still largely about people, communication, and collaboration. It comes down to that. I think the human
Relationships,
element is still very present.
It is indeed. So, what, if anything, concerns you about the future of the industry at this point, Richard?
I'm concerned about a handful of things. I'm sure we will work our way through it like we have all of the challenges in the past. Um, one challenge I see a lot right now, and it's not confined to this industry, but I see it in my daily life, is simply communication. And I said it a moment ago. We had 3 or 4 ways we communicated in the late '80s, and we've probably got a dozen or more now. At the same time, I'm not sure we're communicating or collaborating any better, and if some cases maybe even worse. I may have a stack of 100 emails I'm trying to deal with, just like everybody else I'm talking to. And if we're lucky, we get a response or can make a response on a handful of those. It feels like sometimes we move one little piece of the puzzle at a time rather than getting a complete answer or something like that. In general, I see that as a big threat to the industry, not so much just the industry, but your business as a whole. As far as the industry specific, within that, I think as that communication becomes more difficult and companies strive for lean manufacturing and cost cutting, economies of scale, things like that, it becomes easier and easier to lose touch with some of the value. And it's more difficult for me as a salesperson, or even for some of the manufacturers that I'm trying to support, to see and understand and articulate that value. And that has to do a lot with the quality of the end product and the quality of the presence for the end customer. So I think we have to be very careful about that. We're going to see things like artificial intelligence, and who knows what the next breakthrough is going to be. Those are always going to be out there, and they're going to be great tools. But we can't lose sight of the real product that we're trying to achieve or to promote, and that is collaboration, communication, and providing a solution or a result for your customer, your stakeholder, whoever it is that you're talking to.
No, it's 100%. I couldn't have said it any better. That's an element that I think needs some work at this point, Richard.
Yeah, we'll
Let's
leave it
just
at
say that. And the number of different areas. And AI is great. It does a lot of things for you, but I don't know. That human connection, I think, is where it's at, and where it will circle back around to eventually
I
at
think
some
it's going to be
point.
like a lot of the other technological changes. I mean, if you look back at the internet and the rapid growth it had in the very late '90s and early 2000s, it was supposed to be everything, and it is just now starting to achieve some of the results that were predicted back then. And it's
Hmm.
good. The internet, through, like I mentioned a moment ago, the ability to communicate. We're communicating. We're in, I think, 3 different locations. We're having a video conference that's being recorded. I can have communications with customers and engineers and stakeholders that may be in various states or locations or even countries. On the other hand, it's still important for me to sit down in front of those people sometimes as well. So I think it's understanding how to use the tools and when to use them and how to optimize for the best results with them.
We're seeing a lot of trends in the industry, that people are talking about with different controls and AI, even AI. But are there any trends you feel are creeping into the industry that people aren't talking about or should be talking about?
There are, and I'm not sure they're creeping in. It's been an ever-present trend for quite some time now, and it has both a good and bad side, or double-edged sword nature about it. And that's what I'll call. I think we may have talked about this before at some point, but consolidation. And that's happening at all levels. From the manufacturer standpoint, when I say manufacturer, I'm talking about a fluid power manufacturer. There are 3 or 4 major fluid power manufacturers now that, for the most part, have the bulk of the major business. There's some ancillary manufacturers below that. If you go back 2 or 3 decades, though, there were 4 or 5 times as many smaller manufacturers. And within that, you had some people that had really interesting niches or very unique products. Some of those products haven't survived, and they were great products. Some of them maybe deserve to be moved aside. There are others that sometimes I still see applications that would have been nice to have had those products around. And on the other end of the scale or the scope is when you look at distributors. The distribution, the nature of distribution has changed significantly through consolidation. Again, more and more people have bought other companies. The smaller independent distributors have more and more been purchased or acquired by larger organizations, and that gives everyone buying power and more presence. It gives everyone the ability to use, once again, the economies of scale, use kind of cut down on some redundancy in some of the administrative nature of things and create a more productive environment. But it's kind of created a situation that's happened both with the manufacturers and distributors where there's a lot of legacy lines that when these buyouts occur, there's a lot of overlap. And how do you handle that? In the past, where you may have 1 or 2 distributors in an area that carried a product, now you've got 4 or 5 that carry the same product. So there's a lot less exclusivity. There's a lot more competition for the same customers. Your margins erode, and the manufacturers have the same challenge. You handle how do you handle an acquisition when you buy a competing product line and you've got a whole new group of distributors? And I can only imagine what it might be like for the end customer, the manufacturers of the products, the manufacturers that are making the machines that our products go on. How do you maintain those loyalties in your customer or distributor relationships? So it's confusing all the time. And I don't know if there's an answer to any of that. I see that as an ongoing threat as well as an opportunity, because with size comes a lot more resource for innovation. So I see that as a challenge coming, that or a big challenge that's been occurring for a long time. I don't hear it vocalized a lot in that specific way. I see it hear it vocalized in certain contexts, but I see from all angles that has changed the nature of the industry.
Certainly have. This ties into that a little bit, and it's an off the books. But in talking about the consolidation and what's going on and just what's been happening overall geopolitically and with tariffs and that sort of thing, how have you been impacted on the supply chain side?
The last 5 or 6 years have been a challenge on the supply side. In that time, I've worked for 2 different companies, one a manufacturer and the other a distributor. I can say it's been an interesting roller coaster ride the last 5 or 6 years, going from oversupply to undersupply to unpredictable tariffs, like you said. I think it has illustrated the need to have some flexibility in the supply chain. And I mentioned earlier, one of the challenges with consolidation is the ever-present desire to cut cost out of products and to go to lean manufacturing and all of the techniques associated with it, all the associated philosophies there. And I think that's wise. It helps everyone be more efficient, but there are always potentials for something that no one's thought of. And we've had several of those in the past few years. Who would have ever predicted a pandemic and everybody trying to work remotely that physically could? Some of the tariffs were difficult to anticipate, and then even now with that seeming to be, there's more question marks there. I think it's smart to do everything you can to lay out a lean supply chain, a very efficient system, but there's always a chance something's going to happen, and that's where the collaboration I was talking about earlier and the preparedness and kind of being a little bit nimble, that's where it comes in, the person-to-person relationship. How do you react when something's not working the way it's supposed to? And those things are going to happen, and they're going to be the things you're not going to predict. You may have some ideas, you may have some contingencies. There's always going to be something that no one really predicted. Obviously, you say in the hindsight, oh, I thought that could happen, but very few people will have actually predicted it. That's where personal relationships come in and bridge that gap.
Percent.
Hey, if you could turn the clock back, say 30, 35 years, and you were talking to a young Richard Woodruff just starting out on the business, what type of advice would you give them?
I would tell young Richard not to be as concerned about the wins and losses so much. Be willing to take a few more losses, take a few more risks. Don't let rejection, don't let other challenges create fear. Just know that that's part of the game. Be flexible, be energetic, be optimistic. And when I say optimistic, don't be optimistic in a Pollyanna sort of way. Be optimistic, and things are going to be tough from time to time. Something's going to happen that, like I said a moment ago, you can't predict, or something comes out of left field, or something maybe that you saw coming happens, and it knocks you off your feet for a while. Be ready to adjust to those, but also know that's part of life, and don't stress about it. Enjoy the process. Take more chances and learn and be curious about everything you can. Curiosity, I think it paves the way. It makes us not get old, and it to be continually learning. And I try to follow that even today. Learn something from everybody. Try to finish the day a little bit better than I started it, as far as knowledge. And just don't be afraid of the rejections, because you got to get through those to get to the yeses and learn something from them.
This is just good advice, like, Richard. I think you missed your calling here. Maybe some type of speaking gig should be, part of your
Yeah, well,
rotation
maybe
here,
someday
right?
second career, maybe.
Yeah, there you go. So, for young folks coming into the industry, right? Where Alan and I are both very high on that and want to see more young folks come in and get involved. What do you think would be most beneficial for younger folks coming in to learn and wrap their head around to be
That's a great
successful?
question, and I don't have an absolute answer of anything to that, but I try to practice that a little bit, in that I'm a mentor for some students at a local college on some of their National Fluid Power Association competition products, and been working with them on that. So I've gotten a little bit of firsthand experience, and I think the schools are gradually doing a little bit better specific to fluid power. If it's not a course, they're at least addressing it better through some of the mechanical engineering courses and things like that. I think sometimes, though, I think just having conversations with the students and having an outlet so the students or someone new in the industry can understand a little bit of what I said a moment ago. Things don't happen magically overnight. It's a journey, it's a process, and helping walk a student through that. Um, it's quite interesting. Some of the students I've worked with, very, very bright young adults, they're asking questions and I have to think back, wow, there was a time that didn't seem obvious to me. So I think it's good to have those conversations. And I can only relate that back to when I started. My parents, my dad was a World War II veteran, worked on the farm, as I mentioned, and also had a secondary job, or I guess it's a primary job when I was growing up, was at General Motors. My mom was a nurse. And to them, going to work, putting in 8 hours, coming home was what you're supposed to do. Well, that's transitioned a lot over the years. Careers aren't as solid, or they're not as fixed and linear as they once were. So we have to be more imaginative. We have to be more flexible, and we have to plot our own course to some extent. And I'll go back to what I said earlier. The things you need are positivity, creativity, curiosity, and some flexibility, because sometimes you don't know what's going to happen. And those are the things, whenever I'm asked in front of a group of students, or whenever I'm mentoring some students, those are the things I try to relate to them.
Great.
Those are the things I'm happy to see that there are students engaging in this industry. I know that I'm hearing a lot about how manufacturing in general, and I consider this very much a manufacturing centric type job, is somewhat frowned upon because it's not viewed as nice and clean and modern and flashy. There's a good living, there's a good life to be made when you find the right fit in those roles. I do want to encourage people to consider that if they have an aptitude for those types of industries. And I see people being successful with it. The people I see putting energy into it do very well. There's a good opportunity if someone wants to work at it. So that's my plug for the industry too.
And a good one it is. A good one it is.
Yeah, very good.
Well,
Well, Richard, it's
thanks
been
for
fabulous
having me.
having
I
you on.
appreciate it, and do want to say that I've kind of followed your podcast for a little while now, and I'm honored to be here, especially in the footsteps of some of the folks I know that you've already had on the show.
Yeah, but we really appreciate it. It's
I
been
sure
great.
do.
We have a yeah, lot of good information in here and very good. So thank you for taking the time
Well,
out
thanks for having me. I
to
appreciate
talk
it.
to us.
Thank you.
Take care, Richard.